Hi all, I have another amazing game to show you this morning. Senpai is playing on a 4-core i7 against Leela ID 525. The time control is 5 minutes with 3-second increment. So this is from AlphaGo, who created this game. D4 as part of a gauntlet of games. So this is a very interesting game from that gauntlet. We see Leela playing e6. This used to be, this is something which Mikhail Botvinnik played, but the book moves are given to them. It can transpose either into a French defense of e4 d5, or in this game a Dutch defense potentially c4 f5. So it's a safe way of getting into the Dutch defense without all the anti-Dutch systems. So here we see e3, bit of a meek move. Usually g3 is standard practice, I think stemming from Akiba Rubinstein as a way of playing against the Dutch defense. So fianchetto the bishop. But we have here this meek looking move, e3. So how is this punishable? d5. So Leela actually goes for a Stonewall formation. That does clamp down on the e4 square, and now addresses the e5 issue, which could be an issue by making sure that's covered by the bishop at least. c5 releases the tension in the center, but white might be trying to install a long-term advantage on the queen side with b4 later. This is actually prevented for the moment with a5. White castles knight f6, and now knight a4, knight bd7, b3. Now, quite a surprising move. Leela plays, instead of casting, just rook g8. So that's quite fascinating in its own right. Just to accelerate the possibility of g5. We can see that if black castles, it might be a bit of a hassle to play g5 with the rook on f8. So why not? Rook g8. Bishop b2. We have g5. Pure cavewoman Leela game this in the Dutch defense. What more could you ask? g3. h5. Already it's dangerous. If h4, then for example taking knight g4, this position is very nice. Black could play for knight e4 here with a threat of knight takes f2 check and knight g3, for example. Just to put that on the board, bang, knight takes g3. So that kind of thing means that maybe the knight should be taken, and this gives black a good grip on the light squares, and after queen g5, black's just big advantage. So it's already pretty dangerous. It's not that easy to react to this. So white's already seeming a little bit like a sitting duck here. Queen e7, a3, h4, b4. We have queen h7. Yeah, it's like this is brewing around the white king here. It's not exactly, it doesn't seem to have exactly been castled into safety, but rather an ongoing into a storm. So h takes g was played. Here, f takes is played. If h takes g, as you might imagine, the h file can be quite dangerous, and in fact queen h3 might be the most clinical, with the idea of knight g4 and the king's not running anywhere, and then rook h8. You know, for example, this position, if white wasn't doing anything, it's going to be queen h1 mate. But yeah, it's just far too dangerous to basically take with the h pawn. So we have fg trying to offer defense laterally. Knight g4 anyway. Now b6, the bishop drops back, rook a e1. The knight, this knight comes in, queen g2, rook h8, rook e2. Now queen h5. This is a very interesting move, potentially putting pressure on light squares. Rook d1. We have now another cool looking move, king e7. Yep, the king vacates the e8 square, which means the bishop can now wriggle round, as Dutch defense Stonewall players are used to. The bishop wriggling round here, e8, and now bishop g6, so improve the position of that bishop. a4, white's not really up to much here. We see the move knight e4. Hold me. Okay, so knight e4 is played, and this really, I don't believe, can be tolerated. White took on e4. If rook d1, then black could consider knight takes g3 here, just taking out two key pawns, which is very dangerous if queen takes here, then queen h1. So taking out 2 pawns it looks pretty fatal. If black just builds up after that on the h file like this, for example, and then plays f4, opening up this bishop, this looks like white's on the way out in this kind of scenario. Like, for example, this is winning material in the game. That kind of scenario is a disaster building up there. So it seems too dangerous, even though the bishop's on b8, it is actually quite functional against g3. So that's taken. We have f takes. So you might think, well, this rook's not in the game. Maybe white's got a point, or maybe not. Knight d2, bishop f5 is played, which wriggles the bishop even further to put intensity onto light squares potentially. Bishop c3, knight f6, with ideas of both bishop h3 and bishop g4. Bishop d1, bishop h3 now, hitting the queen. Queen f2, and now bishop g4, so both, in fact. We have the move knight f1, not moving the rook. So why? Why is the exchange given up here? If rook e1, then bishop takes this position, knight g4 is winning material, hitting the queen and h2. And if h2 drops, the position drops basically after check. This position is highly unpleasant for white, with the king in the firing line. For example, this is losing the queen, so that would be a disaster for black. So the exchange is given up. Does Leela want to take it? Or do something else? In fact, Leela does seem to express a desire for fawn pawns, Thorn, fawn pawns, and refuses to take the exchange here. Instead, bishop f3, just putting a lot of pressure on the light squares, and with massive, threats like knight g4 coming up, we see white scrambling to defend across the second rank. Now, not even knight g4 here is played, though. Everything's trying to defend h2 here, as you can see. But actually, the more sadistic looking knight h7 is played. And if black got a few moves in, then g4, knight g5 to h3 is checkmate there. We see queen e1, and now rook f8, rook ed2, g4, and this is what I mean. It's like there's a preference at installing a fawn pawn on f3. White does take on f3, g takes. Okay, so queen f2, now we have queen h3, rook a2, and the knight now comes to f6 to play with the g4 square. So we have now also rook g8 though first, putting more pressure on g3. And in fact, rook g5, and in fact, forget about g4 altogether now. g3 is a great target here. Knight h5, bishop e1 trying to defend g3 now. So we've got knight, bishop and queen trying to defend here. e5. Now this is very interesting. Queen d2, e takes. White's trying to batten down the hatches, but there's a move here which does mean the rook might have a role in the attack. I wonder if you can guess it here. Well, actually it's a fairly obvious move. I hope you can find it. Bishop f4, the bishop finally moves, so it's activating the rook. The pawn's pinned, of course, so hitting the queen. Queen c3. We have a build-up on g3 again. And now this is where white cracks totally. There just seems to be no defensive resource here against black crashing through. White offers an entire rook here. Yeah, I think it's basically all crashing through in this position. So rook g2 just offering an entire rook. Let's have a quick look. Okay, in this position it's fairly hopeless. It seems one of my engines is going crazy, wanting to offer the queens with queen e3 or queen d2, which just loses the queen obviously. And in the game it was a crazy move, rook g2 here. So one of the reasons as an example, rook cb2, black just crashes through as you might expect here. Actually with this move, rook takes g3 in particular, seems very good as an example. Bishop takes g3, and you can see the queen and bishop here are not letting the king go anywhere. and it's pretty nasty. If, for example, knight takes, check, check, and doesn't matter where the king goes. If e3, then there's queen h6, checkmate. And on the back row, then there's queen h1, checkmate. So yeah, white basically, in effect, kind of resigns with that move. We have f takes. So rook takes. The bishop drops back. Black does lose the a pawn, but that wasn't a major concern throughout the game, losing the a pawn. Knight f4. The rook doesn't move here. Again, we have queen d2. So yeah, other horrible things are happening now. Knight takes g2, and here this is just a rook up, basically. So yeah, the game continued a bit until this threshold, where actually the game continues until this threshold. Yeah, white resigns here. There's too much of a big material difference, big evaluation difference. So a rook up, rook f5 to infiltrate via f3 will do the job here, for example, like this. So I thought it was an attractive Dutch defense direct attacking game. I hope you enjoyed it as much as me. Comments, questions, likes, shares appreciated. Thanks very much.